fat chains, leading the odds against sugar, processed food, obesity, and disease, by Robert Lustig. There are only two things that are more important, and food, air and water, shelters a distant fourth. Food matters. Unfortunately, food now matters even more than it should. Food is beyond a necessity. It's also a commodity, and it has been reformulated to be an addictive substance. Robert H. Lustig. The Darth Vader of the food empire. If a calorie is a calorie, then all fats would be the same because they each release 9.0 calories per gram of energy when burned. But they're not the same. There are good fats which have valuable properties, such as being anti-inflammatory, and bad fats which can cause heart disease and fatty liver disease. Likewise, all proteins and amino acids should be the same, since they release 4.1 calories per gram of energy when burned, except that we have high-quality protein, which may reduce appetite, and we have low-quality protein, which is full of branched-chain amino acids, which has been associated with insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. Finally, all carbohydrates should be the same, since they also release 4.1 calories per gram of energy when burned, but they're not. A closer look at the specific breakdown of the carbohydrate data reveals something interesting. There are two classes of carbohydrate: starch and sugar. Starch is made up of glucose only, which is not very sweet and which every cell in the body can use for energy, although there are several other sugars. When I talk about sugar here and in the rest of this book, I am talking about the sweet stuff, sucrose and high fructose corn syrup, which both contain the molecule fructose. Fructose is very sweet and is inevitably metabolized to fat. It is the primary villain, the Darth Vader of the empire, beckoning you to the dark side of this sordid tale. Insulin, the number one hormone for fat. Insulin, in common parlance, is known as the diabetes hormone. Diabetics inject insulin to lower their blood glucose. But where does the glucose go? To the fat. Insulin's actual job is to be your energy storage hormone. When you eat something usually containing some form of carbohydrate, your blood glucose rises, signaling the pancreas to release insulin commensurate with the rise in blood glucose. Insulin then tops off the liver's energy reserve by making liver starch, and shunts any amino acids from the blood into muscle cells. Excess fatty acids, or blood lipids, are cleared into fat cells for storage for a rainy day, where they get turned into greasy triglycerides. There is no energy storage without insulin. It is the key that unlocks the door to the fat cell to let energy enter and subsequently be stored as fat. Insulin makes fat. The more insulin, the more fat, and there it sits and sits for as long as there is insulin around. When the insulin levels drop, the process goes in reverse. The triglycerides get broken down, causing the fat cells to shrink. When it happens, that's weight loss, and the fatty acids re-enter the bloodstream and travel back to the liver, where they are burned by the liver or other organs. In this way, by cycling our insulin up and down, we burn what we need and store the rest. First, we have insulin. As Lustig says, insulin makes fat. The more insulin, the more fat. Get your insulin under control, and you optimize your metabolic health and weight. Pop quiz. What drives insulin through the roof more than anything else? Yep, sugar. Another hormone that's actively involved in our gluttony and sloth is leptin. Lustig tells us that leptin is a protein made and released by fat cells. It circulates in the bloodstream, goes to the hypothalamus, and signals the hypothalamus that you've got enough energy stored up in your fat. The discovery of leptin closed the loop, providing a servomechanism in which the body's fat cells told the hypothalamus whether the animal was in energy surplus or dearth. Here's the problem though. High insulin blocks the leptin signal, mimicking brain starvation, so that we feel hungry even when we have eaten. Big butt fat versus belly fat. Whenever we step on the scale, we are measuring the sum of 4 different body compartments, only one of which is bad for us. 1. Bone. The more bone, the longer you live. 2. Muscle. More muscle is better for your health. Muscle takes up glucose. More exercise means more muscle, and more muscle means better insulin sensitivity. When you are building bone and muscle, you are providing a method for burning energy rather than storing it. which leads to improving your health regardless of your weight. 3. Subcutaneous fat. This makes up about 80% of our total body fat and is what gave Marilyn Monroe her hourglass figure. Believe it or not, more subcutaneous fat is better for your health. 4. Visceral fat. The only compartment that is consistently bad for us is our visceral, also known as abdominal, ectopic, or big belly fat. This consists of fat in areas where it doesn't belong, including fat inside your abdomen and inside your organs. It makes up about 20% of our total body fat, or about 4-6% of our total body weight. Visceral fat is the fulcrum on which your health teeters. As Lustig tells us, not all pounds are created equal. Big butt fat, science says that's much better than big belly fat. It's the visceral fat that'll kill us. When it comes right down to it, it's all about your middle. This whole obesity, health, longevity question centers on your abdominal, visceral, or big belly fat, at least statistically. Why so many diets work? Can low-fat and low-carb diets both be right, or both wrong? What do the Atkins diet, protein and fat, the honest diet, and the traditional Japanese diet have in common? On the surface they seem to be diametrically opposite, but they all have one thing in common. They restrict sugar. Every successful diet in history restricts sugar. Sugar is, bar none, the most successful food additive known to man. When the food industry adds it for palatability, we buy more. And because it's cheap, some version of sugar appears in virtually every processed foodstuff now manufactured in the world. Sugar, and specifically fructose, is the Lex Luthor of this story. That's from a chapter called Fructose, the Toxin. Ever wonder why diets that are so different on the surface can all get such great results? Well, Lustig walks us through why diets like Atkins, Ornish, Paleo, and the traditional Japanese diet all work. Some are low carb and high fat, others are high carb and low fat. It's simple, they all reduce sugar. The best deal of medicine, exercise. Irrespective of weight, consistent exercise is the single best way for people to improve their health. That's 273 hours paid in for 3 years of life gained, or a 64,000% return on investment. The best deal of medicine, voting with every dollar we don't spend. Reducing sugar consumption will not be easy, particularly in the emerging markets of developing countries, where soft drinks are cheaper than milk or potable water. Social intervention is needed to reduce the supply and eventual demand for sugar. Despite the obvious medical, social, and economic benefits, we face an uphill political battle against the powerful sugar and food processing lobby, and against those in government who are already corrupted. Any change will require active engagement from all stakeholders, and that means you, especially you. With enough public clamor, tectonic shifts in policy do become possible. Take, for instance, bans on smoking in public, the use of designated drivers, airbags in cars, and condom dispensers in public restrooms, all unfathomable 30 years ago. Your voice changed the world. It can be a new world. Yet again, as you will see, all successful diets share 3 precepts: low sugar, high fiber, and fat and carbohydrate consumed together in the presence of an offsetting amount of fiber. Anything after that is window dressing. Robert H. Lustig. In a nutshell, your body fat is your biggest long-term risk for infirmity. Nothing correlates with diabetes, heart disease, and cancer better than your fat. Robert H. Lustig.